Sound check. It's okay. Thank you, Speaker Pelosi and Dr. Colfax, for coming to NEMS to celebrate the passage of American Rescue Plan. My name is Dr. Kenneth Tai. I am the Chief Health Officer of Northeast Medical Services. NEMS is one of the largest community health centers in the U.S., serving the Asian population, started 50 years ago here in Chinatown. We have 12 clinics throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, serving over 65,000 patients. Most are low income, uninsured, and prefer to be served in a language other than English. I want to read a thank you letter from a 90-year-old monolingual Chinese-speaking woman who expressed her gratitude for receiving the COVID-19 vaccines at NEMS. This is what she said. First of all, I want to thank NEMS for the special care that you provide to seniors. I'm 90 years old and have a history of severe allergic reaction to medications, so I was afraid to get the COVID-19 vaccines at first. My doctor at NEMS discussed my allergy history and even consulted with your allergy specialists. When I decided to get the vaccine, the nursing staff in the vaccination clinic took great care of me, even helping me put on my coat. During the observation period, the nursing staff repeatedly checked on me and advised me on aftercare. Their loving, caring, and kind attitude was very touching. Thank you for your staff. Thank you very much. I'm glad our staff was able to help her overcome her concerns about the COVID vaccine. I'm proud that our staff for taking the time and effort to make this woman feel comfortable and cared for. Her story reminds us why we do what we do every day. This location is our new PACE Center. It's one of our 10 vaccination centers. Altogether, we have administered over 31,000 vaccines to date. Since the pandemic, our in-person visits have plummeted, but thanks to Speaker Pelosi and her leadership, we were able to bill for telephone and video-based telehealth visits. In fact, close to 40% of our total visit in 2020 were done virtually. We have performed nearly 16,000 COVID tests at our drive-through and walk-up tests. Now, thanks to President Biden's Health Center COVID-19 vaccine program, we are receiving COVID-19 vaccines directly from HRSA, with additional vaccines and support from San Francisco Department of Public Health. We've been vaccinating around 4,000 people every week. We're so thankful for the American Rescue Plan, which passed through Congress due to the leadership of Speaker Pelosi. The plan will allocate $7.6 billion with a B dollars in flexible emergency COVID-19 fundings for community health centers like NEMS across the U.S. NEMS will receive $11 million for the next 2 years. We plan on using these funds to expand our vaccination efforts, hiring additional staff for call center, mental health, nursing, and medical providers. We also plan to use the fundings for mobile testing and vaccination efforts to the communities with limited transportation options. This funding is especially important for our work to care for and protect the vulnerable Asian seniors who've been targeted in recent months by hate and violence. Thank you, Speaker Pelosi, for championing and shepherding this historic legislation through Congress. I want to take this opportunity to thank you on the behalf of our patients and the community. Welcome, Speaker Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tai. I thank you for being a model to the country on how we meet the needs in a culturally appropriate, linguistically comfortable way to the people we're here to serve. You are a model, as I said, and again, as we were writing the legislation, we wanted to be able to meet the needs of people, and you are an example of how to do that. I appreciate your kind words. I more appreciate your saving of lives. You're reading the letter from your patient It's the most eloquent statement of support for what NEMS does, but also for how important health care is and the culturally appropriate care that you give. When we were having the fight on the Affordable Care Act to save it, we had 10,000 events where people told their stories. Those stories, again, are the most eloquent. Congratulations on that wonderful success. And did you say she was 90 years old? 90 years old. Wow. So I'm honored to be here with you, to be here with Dr. Grant Colfax, the Director of Public Health for the City of San Francisco, a champion of science and health, and I'll be introducing him in a moment. It's a privilege to be here at NEMS, which for over 50 years has been a force for justice and progress in the city. It's no accident that $11 million is there because, again, this is a nationally significant example of how funds can best be used. Thank you for the work to deliver life-saving care, the most vulnerable, in a way, again, that's culturally competent, and thank you for being a source of hope and healing to thousands, as we have heard, as you fight on the front lines to combat this pandemic. Today, we are having a day of action, a teach-in across the country. It is part of other events leading up to this. Last week, the First Lady was in Delano administering vaccines to farm workers. The Governor and First Lady of California joined her there. The Governor was in Bay Area this week, as well as we're very proud of our Vice President, who was in Oakland yesterday, and now we're here today. And at the end of this press conference, the President of the United States will be part of all of that, again, focusing on the importance of vaccines. And Dr. Tai talked about some of what is in the package. But what's in the package doesn't work unless people take advantage of it. Hence the teach-in to say what is available to them. And it's not just about the vaccines, although that's very important. It is, unless we crush the virus, we are not going to be able to solve some of our other challenges in our economy and education as well. But the fact is that, again, here we are in the lead on crushing the virus. In addition to that, we want to make sure that the rescue package is successful in what it set out to do. Vaccines in the arms, money in the pockets of the American people, children safely in school, workers safely back on the job, and many things in the legislation to facilitate that. And we want people, if they're eligible for a child tax credit, and most families in America are, that they take advantage of it, as well as other benefits in the legislation. So around the country, we're focusing on vaccinations here today, but many of my colleagues may be focusing on other aspects of the legislation. You know, I always say everything is about the children. The children, the children, the children. Their health, vaccination, their education, substantial resources for safely going back to school in the bill, the economic security of their families, again, money in the pockets, opening businesses again, safely. And that economic security of the families includes their seniors that Dr. Tai talked about, but also what's in the bill that is very substantial is transformative legislation protecting the pensions of America's working families, again, for the children. And so this legislation, again, for the children with the big tens of billions of dollars for child care, over $170 billion for education, child tax credit, just remarkably transformative, taking half the children out of poverty. The list goes on. Today, as I say, right here at NEMS, we're talking about the vaccinations. $21 billion nationwide in the bill, over $50 billion for testing, tracing, treatment. That's still very important, and mask wearing still very important in all of this. New initiatives to drastically lower the cost of the Affordable Care Act, and we're very, very proud of that. I feel proprietary interest of the Affordable Care Act. And in this legislation, we raise the we lower the threshold for how people can participate in the subsidies. Nearly $8 billion, as you mentioned, 7 point, I think you say 6 or 5, whatever, billion to expand public health workforce. This is very important. We have been delinquent in this regard. Again, you are a model to make this possible. And $4 billion in behavioral and mental health, including to address provider burnout. Our heroes. Much of this bill is what we had in the HEROES Act. Our heroes, our state and local workers, our health care providers, our teachers, our transportation, sanitation, first responders, police and fire, food workers, and the rest who make our lives possible. That is in this legislation as well and affects us here. Now, less than a month after the passage and the signing of the American Rescue Package, nearly 220 million vaccines have been delivered. 170 million have been administered. 170 million, over 100, and again, President Biden is way ahead of his schedule of 100 million in the first 100 days. He'll be closer to 200 million in the first 100 days of vaccines, doses, and inoculations. Vaccines in the arm, money in the pockets. Nearly 150 million checks have been sent. 150 million people have received a check, and nearly $1 trillion have been put, as part of this, nearly $1 trillion put in the pockets of America's workers. We're on track to exceed, again, the President's 100 million in 100 days, as I said, and within 2 weeks, nearly all adults will be eligible for the vaccine within 5 miles of their homes. That logistical consideration is very important because it can be a barrier. And here in California, thanks to the leadership of Governor Newsom, whom I mentioned earlier, we have now officially administered 20 million vaccines, including 4 million to the hardest hit communities in our state. I want to salute Mayor London Breed. We're so proud of her leadership in San Francisco for her outstanding progress to deliver the vaccine in San Francisco, last week reaching a record of 14,000 vaccines in arms per day. Wow. Well over the goal of 10,000, and I salute Dr. Colfax, and I'll be introducing him in a moment, as I said. Half of San Francisco adults have received at least one dose, and 30% have been fully vaccinated. We're working to ensure that the most vulnerable, thank you, Dr. Tai, for your leadership, and the staff here of NEMS, have access to the vaccine, and that's why Congress recently passed legislation just to clarify and to emphasize that any veteran in any VA facility can now get the vaccine, regardless of age or whatever. But as Dr. Tai has said, and NEMS team know, we cannot take our foot off of the accelerator. That is why we're thrilled that the Biden-Harris administration has announced, under the purview of the American Rescue Plan, a $10 billion initiative to expand vaccine access and build vaccine confidence in high-risk communities. What Dr. Tai has talked about in his connection to the community, NEM's connection to the community, is so important because the vaccines only work if people avail themselves of it. And the confidence that you have, the trust that exists in the community with NEMS is very essential to crushing this virus. It's imperative that Americans know that the vaccine is safe and is backed by science. As part of the plan, we secured $6 billion for over 1,000 community health centers. Nearly $1 billion has been awarded to California, including, again, we talked about the $11 million for Northeast Medical Services. Community health centers, they're such an answer to so many challenges that the communities face. I've often said if I were starting a new country, in terms of a health care plan, I would carpet the country with community health centers and then go from there. So thank you for your leadership, your connection to the community, but again, the model that you are for us as we write legislation. Democrats in Washington are hard at work to distribute the life-saving resources of the American Rescue Plan as urgently and as equitably as possible. And this mission, we're grateful for your partnership and your leadership, and again, the model you are. And we thank the entire NEMS team, not just Dr. Ty, he's a great leader, but his entire team for your relentless work to defeat the pandemic and to do so in a way that advances justice in America. Now it is my privilege to yield the floor to the distinguished leader of the Public Health Service in San Francisco, Dr. Grant Colfax. He has been on the job so effectively that we're very, very proud of his leadership. Not only that, he has made himself available to make sure people know, whether it's in community events and the rest, such as this today, but others along the way. Because I'm fond of quoting Lincoln. Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. But for public sentiment and people to participate, they have to know. And Dr. Colfax, working with Mayor London Breed, wants to be sure that people know how they can avail themselves of the benefits of the rescue package, particularly when it comes to crushing the virus. He is a champion in that regard, Dr. Grant Colfax.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Speaker Pelosi, for your incredible support and strong advocacy at the national level, which has resulted in much-needed support for us locally, your leadership during this pandemic. And I want to thank you for your years of focus on public health, from the AIDS pandemic to the ACA to this situation we're in now. Thank you so much. And I also want to acknowledge the President of the Health Commission, Dan Bernal, who's here today. And thank you, Dr. Ty and NEMS for welcoming us to your clinic today and for all of your work in getting our community vaccinated and your ongoing partnership with the Health Department. Speaker Pelosi, you chose a wonderful day to visit. As we just reached a milestone, as you mentioned already, that over 50% of San Franciscans have received at least one shot. So we are continuing to make progress, a major milestone. We still have a way to go, but I'm optimistic about where we are now and where we will be in a few months. As of April 5th, we have vaccinated 82% of residents who are 65 years of age and older. And we know that this is such a key group because they accounted for 85% of people who have unfortunately died of COVID-19 in San Francisco. So we are protecting the most vulnerable with vaccines going into arms. And we have vaccinated 76% of those who are 75 years and older. Since COVID vaccines were first approved for use, we got to work and we set up the infrastructure here in this city to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible and as equitably as possible. We recognized early on, and based on our experience in working with community for decades, that one size would not fit all. And therefore, we have created a robust system of vaccination sites that consist of community clinics like this one, as well as high-volume sites, neighborhood-based sites, where there's limited access to health care, through mobile units, and of course working with our pharmacy partners. Through this incredible network, which we have collaborated with multiple people and community organizations across the city, we now have the ability to administer over 20,000 vaccines a day. The speaker mentioned that we had 14,000 go into arms just late last week. We can do even more. We can do 20,000. We can get San Francisco vaccinated. We just need the vaccine. From the beginning of this pandemic, equity has been front and center in our approach. Our pandemic response strategy has been focusing on the racial, socioeconomic, and health disparities that this pandemic has only highlighted. This is why community-based clinics, community-based organizations, have been key and will continue to be key to our pandemic response and vaccination efforts. We also know that providing low barrier access to vaccines is so important. Every door must be the right door. This means providing in-language supports, a local hotline for those who cannot make appointments online, empowering our community collaborators to help refer and link individuals to vaccine appointments, flexibility, and in some cases, allowing people to drop in without appointments. If we receive, I should say when, I'm being hopeful here, when we receive a steady and increased vaccine supply, we will be well on our way to getting 80% of San Franciscans vaccinated by mid-May. This is exciting, as this is our ticket out. And you know what I will say here, until we get to that high level of vaccine coverage, let's please continue to wear masks. We know they are so effective. Socially distance, avoid large gatherings. We have a little bit longer to go. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's some challenges in these next couple of months, but we are ready to go to get vaccine into arms today in San Francisco. These next couple of months will be pivotal. Let's get to 20,000 a day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Colfax, for being, again, as Dr. Tai is, a model to the nation on how to proceed in the most culturally appropriate, linguistically comfortable way to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. That is our goal because, as you pointed out, within our healthcare system, there have been disparities, and we do not want them solidified as we go forward with this. In fact, we want them to be eliminated, and using this as that opportunity and the substantial funds that go with it. And we're trying to get as much vaccine out as possible, and that is part of the challenge that you spelled out. These resources in this legislation will help do that. Again, this is part of a National Day teach-in for us to talk about the rescue package writ large, and different aspects of it are being addressed around the country. Today, here in San Francisco, we are taking great pride in the success in our state of California and the city of San Francisco under the leadership of Governor Newsom, of Mayor Breed, and others throughout the state. And we're honored, as I said earlier, that the First Lady was in Delano inoculating farm workers the other day, the Vice President in Oakland yesterday, the Governor in the Bay Area as well, and now here, the Speaker of the House. Again, I accept your kind words about the legislation, and I will convey them to the House Democrats, because sadly we had to pass this very important legislation with only Democratic votes. And the members from the Bay Area were very, very substantially involved in writing that legislation. My colleague in representation of San Francisco, Jackie Spear, as well as others. I'm happy to go into if that's part of your questions. Any questions that you may have? Let's start with this subject. I'll be happy to answer other questions, but let's stay on this subject, the rescue package, especially the success in San Francisco on the vaccines. Any questions or observations you want to make on that? If not, Dr. Tai, do you want to say some wrap-up comments about what we're here to do and what the prospects are?
Sure. So I thank you for coming. I think it's, we received so many thank yous and gratitude for the community for, it's such a big relief. Like Dr. Colfax said, the light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter and brighter. So we're really looking forward to reopen more clinics so people can live normal lives, and children can go back to school. I think, it's been such a long time. So thank you, Speaker Pelosi, for such a monumental legislation. It's so important for us and for the community. We really, really deep down, really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, again, I just want to thank San Franciscans for everything that we've done during this unprecedented time, during the pandemic. Because of the the focus on data and science and the fact that community engagement, we have slowed the spread of the virus. San Franciscans beat back 3 surges. Our hospitalization numbers are down dramatically from the winter. Right now we have 25 people in the hospital with COVID-19. Our healthcare system right now is robust. It's not at risk of being overwhelmed. So I'm very hopeful about what we're headed towards. Variants continue to be a concern. So again, we need to be thoughtful and careful as we gradually reopen. Follow the science, continue those preventative behaviors that we know work until we can get the vaccine into arms. And again, we're ready to do 20,000, double our goal that we announced a couple of months ago. Let's continue to make the progress. Let's be optimistic, but let's also be realistic about both the opportunities these next couple of months provide and the ongoing risk. We are still in the pandemic. This thing is by no means over. We're seeing what's happening in some other states right now. We certainly don't, we want to do everything we can to avoid a 4th surge. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Colfax, for your wonderful leadership and for honoring us with your presence and your wisdom conveyed today. Thank you, Dr. Tai, so much. In his remarks, Dr. Colfax mentioned HIV/AIDS. And again, when I went to Congress, that was the first word I said on the floor of the House was about HIV and AIDS, come to fight against HIV and AIDS. And San Francisco, then as now, was a model to the rest of the country in community-based solutions. And as Dr. Tai and Dr. Colfax have told us, is our example here once again. That time we were writing a few years later, we wrote the Ryan White CARE Act, and largely it was based on community-based care from San Francisco in 3 ways: care, prevention, and research. So again, San Francisco is leading the way, as we did then. What Dr. Colfax and Dr. Tai talked about was a decision that was made to again crush this virus. And as Dr. Colfax said, this is about science and governance, to respect and follow the science, and to have the governance to enforce the rules to prevent the further spread, especially as we are concerned about variants and the rest as we go forward. But the progress that has been made has been because of a decision in San Francisco to respect science and governance. If you ignore that, if you don't say, well, I don't care if they say I have to wear a mask or keep my distance or whatever, then you're not solving the problem. The problem solving is a decision. So I thank you for the decision that you have made and the execution of all of that. Any questions on anything? Yes, sir. Unless there's someone who was on topic, I would have hoped that with an epidemic in our country, an economic crisis that is accompanying it, there might be a question on that. But well, I have to yield to the scientist on that. What do you say, Doctor?
So I think what's hopeful about the governor's announcement is that announcement was made based on the concept, and I think the hope and the optimism that every San Franciscan will have 16 and over will have access to vaccine by that date. So what I'm excited about, as I said earlier, we need more vaccine. I took the governor's announcement as a strong indication that the state believes there will be robust supplies of vaccine coming in before June 15th, so we can get those vaccine into arms. We'll see where we are. Again, we need to follow the data, but I'm very hopeful that our whole system will be working at capacity, getting 20,000 vaccine to arms a day, so that we have a better chance of meeting that June 15th date. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question and to being in Chinatown once again, just pointing out the respect that we have in our community for the AAPI community. I would say, just leading up to what comes next, I was very proud of the president when he made his speech about COVID. He talked, and it was initial speech in the White House. He came forward and he included the challenge that we have addressing the AAPI hate crimes that are out there. In the very 24 hours of his inauguration, even before that speech, he tasked the Department of Justice. We didn't even have an Attorney General yet, but he tasked the Department of Justice to focus on the hate crimes in the AAPI community. And that is very, as you know, is very important. We do, again, in everything that we are doing and trying to incorporate that in. Here's the thing, and this is my experience here in San Francisco, and I feel very proud to represent a city, a district that is so blessed with a large Asian AAPI community and a very diverse AAPI community as well. On these hate crimes, and again, we passed hate crimes legislation years ago, again, largely about LGBTQ hate crimes, but it was a model for how we go forward. In order to really address the problem, you have to prove that it's a hate crime. And as you know, in some of our communities, a person my age who might be Chinese, maybe not completely, as would I not be, familiar with some of the vernacular that people use, bad language and stuff, somebody has to write it down. Write it down. Just, you're there, you hear it, write it down so we have proof that this is a hate crime. Now, we don't want to have such a high threshold of proof, but for the moment, we do. And we just want everybody to know that all of us are in this together to fight this. It is, so we have legislation that we have passed about it. When we go back, we will have the COVID hate crimes legislation that we have. We passed it kind of breaks my heart to even talk about it because it's so emotional for us. We passed the Asian hate crimes bill, the Chinese hate crimes, specifically Chinese, because of what somebody over there was saying. It was Grace Meng's legislation. When I went to the floor to talk about the legislation, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, "Look at that, the Speaker of the House on the floor, wasting the time of the Congress, talking about something that doesn't mean that much to most people in our country." Imagine that they would say that. But that's what that is. Now let's hope that public sentiment has changed some of their attitudes on this. But we will have a few pieces of legislation that were on the books anyway to do the ban, the no ban, to reverse the no ban, Muslim ban, which affects some of the Asian Pacific American community, but also to continue to fight on the, and so we'll see what they say when we have the COVID, because as you know, that was kind of the hook that what's-his-name was using on this, the COVID no ban legislation. But we're not going to stop because, and I wish that you could all hear my colleagues speak about this. Doris Matsui, who was born in a camp, talk about it. To hear Grace Meng talk about it. I don't know if you saw the hearing that we had on the legislation. Members were really crying because of what the other side, with the hateful remarks that members of Congress were making about this. So we have a challenge, but we also have a vision and a plan on how to get us through this. But as a practical matter, I keep saying, if you see something like, listen to what that person has to say, because usually they'll say some nasty thing because they're doing some very nasty thing. So let's stay in touch about that because it's central to who we are as a country. It's not just about the AAPI community. It's about who we are as a country, that we cannot allow this to take place. And it does, sad to say. Yes. I think that was the Senate Minority Leader, wasn't it? Wasn't it Mitch McConnell who asked for? Oh, was it Kevin? They reported to me that it was Mitch McConnell this morning. Maybe they both are doing it. Well, first of all, let's just say, when we make a decision to respect science and governance, we also have to respect facts. And it's no use looking for an excuse. That is not the cause of the COVID crisis in our country. The cause of the country and the loss of so many lives comes to the fact that 1 year ago, the President of the United States called it a hoax, refused to accept the science, and refused to engage in any governance that would help prevent the spread of it. Even his own advisors now are saying at least half the people who have died may not have died if there was other. So for them to start blaming it on whoever's coming across the border and asking for a classified briefing is really more subterfuge than science. Any other questions? You said you had a second question. Yes. Well, I believe, I'm glad you asked that question in a larger sense, instead of quoting the ridiculousness of the Republicans in the Congress. The fact is that we're on a good path at the border under leadership of President Biden. It's about three things. It's about restructuring how we do what is happening there, because we were in a very bad situation under the Trump administration. It's about a refugee plan. When we had a hearing on the the Muslim ban, that would be 4 years ago, when that first was instituted, the American Evangelical Association, the representative of American evangelicals, came to that hearing to testify against the president's position of the Muslim ban. And at that time, what he said that holds true now is the American Refugee Resettlement Program is the crown jewel of American humanitarianism. That's being said by the evangelicals. The crown jewel of American. So we have to restructure what we're doing. We have to have a decent respect for our responsibilities for people who have a legitimate cause for refugee status, and we also have to have the resettlement as quickly as possible. It is estimated that 70-some% of the children have a relative in the country, and of that number, maybe 40-some% have a parent in the country. But you have to do it in a safe way, identifying carefully to make sure that the relationship is a safe one for the child. So I call it the 3 R's. Restructuring the whole system, respecting the refugee status that we have an obligation to do, and the resettlement in a way that is safe for the children, because it's always about the children. Any other questions from anybody else? Yes, sir. You had 2. Okay, yes, ma'am. Especially what? Well, let's hope that they will be concerned about the safety of our bridges, the safety of the air that our children breathe, that they would be concerned about that. And this is not about that. This is about the rescue plan. But the jobs bill that will come next is probably an appropriate way to segue from here. And that is this. Again, some history about America. At the founding of our country, Thomas Jefferson tasked the Secretary of the Treasury, Gallatin, for a Gallatin plan to build the infrastructure of America. America was expanding, the Louisiana Purchase, Lewis and Clark expeditions, and the rest. And so this was the plan. And they built the Cumberland Road, the Erie Canal. Big, think big and transformative about infrastructure. 100 years later, President Teddy Roosevelt an anniversary of the 100 years, he instituted his infrastructure plan. It's called the National Park Service, something so, again, transformative for our country, so big and all-American. In the 50s, the late 50s, President Eisenhower, for security purposes, instituted a big transformative plan, the interstate highway system, again, to unify the country for security reasons. And now it's a time for us to have a big transformative system that is, again, in the keeping with our founders and leaders throughout our country, our history, and that is something that is entrepreneurial, that is, again, based on what the country needs. And the National Science, the National Society of Civil Engineers has said that we are trillions of dollars behind in the infrastructure of our country. This is a security, a safety issue for the safety of our bridges. It's a jobs issue, jobs issue, jobs not only to build the infrastructure, but jobs to promote commerce as a result of that improved infrastructure, whether it is the dredging of our harbors for more trade, or whether it is the facilitating of transportation to get produce, especially to market where time is a factor. And so it is, again about jobs, good paying jobs, made in America jobs. And I do believe that, as you see, it's very popular among the American people, and it will have bipartisanship among the American people, and it will have bipartisanship among the officials in the communities that will benefit, whether it's a water project. Some of our water projects are over 100 years old, made of wood and brick. Much of it contains lead. Again, for the children, as the president said, who's going to be against getting lead out of the water for our children? So again, it's about broadband. It was mentioned earlier about how important it is for everybody to have access for, whether it's telemedicine or distance learning or just promotion of commerce and the rest. So we're very excited about the particulars that will be in the jobs bill. We would hope that that would appeal to the Republicans in the Congress. We had a hearing. I've called upon my committee chairs, the committee chairs of committees of jurisdiction, to reach across the aisle and see where they could find bipartisan common ground. Because, just to go back in history again, historically, infrastructure has not been a partisan issue. We've always been able to work together at the local level to join in on supporting a particular project at the congressional level to get the job done. So I'm very excited about what it is. And again, it is a jobs bill. And if it's a jobs bill, it has to have workforce development initiatives as well as opportunities for all of the communities to be involved, whether it's in jobs, but also in contracts and the rest. So it's pretty exciting. It's transformative. It's in keeping with America's spirit of entrepreneurship, of public-private partnerships, and again, of moving people to school, to work, to market, to whatever, in a way that keeps the air cleaner, improves the quality of life, as again it creates jobs and promotes commerce. So I'm optimistic that hopefully they will be joining in this. One example was they had this, in the interest of reaching across the aisle, we had a hearing a few weeks ago before the Passover Easter break on electrification. And it was a bipartisan hearing under leadership of our chairman, Peter DeFazio. Mr. Graves was the ranking member on that committee. And in that hearing, people came, like the head of FedEx, and those kind of people saying, we're going electric. So if you're going electric, what you have to do is have distribution of charge stations around the country. That's an infrastructure issue. That's a big infrastructure issue. And hearing the private sector say, oh, we're going electric, means we have to do the infrastructure to accommodate that, to move product, move people, but also have clean air. So it was impressive, and I think it made an impression on the Republicans, but we'll find out. When we had a former president up until recently, in our last bill that we passed, it had many good things in it in a bipartisan way. We tried to get focus on electric cars in that, but the president said if that was in the bill, he would not sign the bill. Now we are in a completely different place on that one issue, for example. Science, technology, preeminence in the world. So it's about clean air, clean water. It's about health. It's about jobs, preeminence in the world, and the green technologies. It's about, again, security, making everything safer for the American people. And it's a responsibility that we have to our children and future generations to do so in a way that preserves the planet. If you do believe as I that this is we're God's creation and we need to be good stewards of it, then you would agree. If you don't share that religious belief, that's okay, but we all agree we have a responsibility to the children to preserve the planet. This infrastructure jobs bill is directed to respecting science and governance to get the job done. But here we are today about the rescue package. We're very proud of it, but the pride we take is not in the legislation. The pride we take in NIMS and Dr. Tai for how it is being implemented, because he is making it meet the needs of the people, and that is what its purpose is. And from a science standpoint and from a governance standpoint, we thank Dr. Colfax and Mayor Breed for making so much of this possible as an example to the rest of the country that San Francisco always has been. Thank you so much.